If 2024 was an entree, then the main meal will be in 2025 because this season is going to be the piece de la resistance. It is going to be more tasty. It's going to be more delectable. And I tell you what is going to be so sexy on the palate. I'm Peps with Mad Tommy Roker for Lace Out's 3-team preview. And we're kicking it all off with Adelaide, Brisbane, and Carlton today. So, Peps from Lace Out, you know the great man, Tommy Roker. Good to have you on board, my friend. We're going to have a look at each of these three teams. We're going to belt these out over the next couple of weeks. I'm massively excited. I'm playing a bit of bad cop during these little previews. I know that you've got some good stuff to say about the teams, and I will if I feel I need to. But I think there's also, I'm going to be highlighting one key promise that every single team needs to abide by if they want to have a successful 2025, and that's only based on facts that I'm going to present from 2024. And so we're going to start with the Adelaide Crows, the Adelaide Crows over there in the beautiful South Australia. The Crow Eaters could be the most disappointing team of 2024. They had so much going for them, and if there was one thing that I have to take out for 2025 with Adelaide, it is simply this is their promise to get harder at the contest. And I want to put this in perspective for all the Adelaide supporters out there. In 2024, you were last for opponent contested possessions, 1 percentages, and stoppages per game. Just take that into consideration. Basically, what that says is that you just let the competition run away when it got hard. You let them do all the little nicky bits. You didn't want to work hard around the ball and for each other. And at the stoppages, you just didn't have them. Just not hard at the contest. And the thing that I have with Adelaide, and hopefully this is going to change with a couple of things that they've brought in, but they can't continue to rely on Laird, Dawson, Saligo, Matt Crouch lifting the load in 2025. So I think Alex Neil-Bullen coming in to this team will lift the standards across the board, but a lot of others need to step up in this team. We could go to Michelini. We could go to Fogarty. Tex Walker can't do it all himself as well too if they want to make finals. And I'll tell you what, Isaac Rankin needs to have that breakout season that everybody knows he's got within him if these guys want to make a challenge for the top 8, because it is not going to be easy. I think we had a little bit of a chat before we came on air. How many teams did you say do you think cannot make finals in 2025?
I mean, look, there's 15 teams that can, and there's 3 that I just don't think, and everybody knows who those 3 teams are. You've got Richmond, who are going to have what's the opposite of a dynasty? It's wooden spoons for
neighbours.
We've got North, who've had their share of bottom finishes, but can they get out of that bottom 3? It's a big leap.
Yep.
And they can't, and they're a bit like Adelaide. Because we've got West Coast and they're like Richmond. They're going to be stuck down there, and they're going to get injuries to their best players, and they're going to play the kids. But we'll talk about that when they get to them. Adelaide, they have had a long rebuild, haven't they?
What do you reckon, mate? What do you reckon about Adelaide? I love a bit of Stevie Nicks. I think he's got a lot of positives to him, and I think the players want to play for him. I just don't know whether the players want to play hard enough. That's the way that I look at it.
That's the other thing, isn't it? When Nicks became coach, he inherited a bunch of sort of legacy players, and those players are still there. They're getting older, they're getting slower, and they haven't been getting results for a long time since that 2017 grand final, which is a bloody long time ago. But that they have rebuilt, refreshed, and they do have a great side on paper. But, is Tex Walker going to get up there in all-Australian form again? Maybe. Sometimes these old stages have a really great sort of end to their career, and they go out in a high note. And he might kick 40 goals, and that's good for them. All right, for him, it's good. For them, it's great. But Wayne Miller, he's a fantastic defender. Can't stay healthy. If they can get him back on the ground, and he will really strengthen their half back line there. Riley O'Brien, he was at a stage there where he was looking like a top 5 ruckman. He wasn't last year, was he?
No.
I mean, we're talking about good cop, bad cop, but sometimes all cops are bastards, and I think that's probably where we're at with Adelaide. We're both probably a bit harsh on them. and are they going to make it into the top 8? I'm going to say middle 6, Peps, middle 6, and whether that's 12th or 7th, up to Adelaide.
I think that, look, they need everything to go right. I like what they did in the off-season. They brought in Neil Bullen, and as a Melbourne supporter, he is heart and soul. And his work rate is going to lift that, especially around the half-forward line, and his leadership side of things is just going to be off the charts, which I think is what they needed. They didn't really have any major leaders outside of Laird, outside of Dawson, probably Walker as well too. But outside of that, who else could you say? Would you say jump on my back and I'll take you to the promised land? I'm not too sure. I love what they did. They brought Isaac coming in, and they've also brought in James Franklin as well too. So they're just adding a little bit more experience to that younger crop. But once again, it is a bit of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with this group. They can either absolutely come out and have a flying start to the season, and then injuries start and they fall in a heap. They could be consistently inconsistent throughout the season, or they could be inconsistently consistent. So have weeks where they're just smashing it for 4, 5, 6, and then go missing for a couple and then come back. Out of all the clubs that are sort of floating around that mid sort of table, they're going to be the really interesting ones, I think, because they've been, like I said, it's 8 seasons since that grand final. And a lot of water has gone under that bridge. And unfortunately, people are still drinking the old stuff and not embracing the new stuff that's throwing through their feet. So I am a little bit buoyant on them, but the trust factor is just not there.
Remember the parting present from our former erstwhile AFL CEO was to give the 2 Adelaide teams gather round. So with 13 games at the Adelaide Oval, they should be competing and they should be contending at the pointy end of the season. If they are not, Nick's is gone. This is his last chance. Because it's been a long enough time. He's got them playing a brand of footy that wins them games. You know, they won a showdown last year, and Port were good. Yep. And, you know, the showdowns don't come easy. But, you know, I don't know. I reckon I could probably encapsulate it in one go. In round 1 last year, which was Gold Coast's second game, Adelaide's first, the Gold Coast just skipped out to a massive lead, and it was like, oh, how good's this? And then it started raining. And Adelaide started playing. And I thought, oh, no, I've seen this movie before. And it turns out I had seen it before, but it was a different movie.
It wasn't Groundhog Day, was it?
Where Rankin tries to win the game off his own boot and kicks a bunch of behinds. And anyway, they lost by, I think, 6 points, and they probably just had another 2 minutes that would have won. But they try to, you know, he tries to put him on his back and do it all himself. And young Rochelle was guilty of a lot as well. They probably could have won 3 more games.
Another one who needs to step up. He had a bit of a ugly 2024, so I think he needs to lift as well too. But Ben Keys had a pretty good season, came out at best and fairest with Dawson, so there's some potential there. Hopefully he continue, not just have, you know, as they would say, second-year blues after a best and fairest as well too. Fogarty's kicking goals, Keys is kicking goals, Rochelle kicking goals. It's good to see Tex Walker and Isaac Rankin. So they've got some firepower up forward. They just need to fire at the same time.
Well, look, mate, they've got a good forward line. Tyler Welsh, I like Tyler Welsh. Of course, we know his old man.
Shuffles. I love Shuffles.
Bit of a journeyman, but still played the requisite number of games at the Crows. And if he's even a half the player his old man was, it's going to be goals. And that's what we saw. I was really surprised to see him slide so far down. Remember, I said he might be a smoky for a bid in that late first round, and he went. I think he ended up going around 40 or something. But he looks to me the goods to just come straight in and eventually replace Tex as that not so big key forward, but he can hold space and work with the big guys that they've got, like Thrillthorpe. Little worried about the age profile, Peps, because we've got 4 blokes who are 30 plus who they rely on, and they're not going to be there for all that much longer. And then you've got to worry about injury concerns and keeping them fresh. So, you know, we're not ageist on this show, but we know
we're factist.
Yeah. And, you know, looking at Tex, he's 34. Brodie Smith's 33. Can they even hold their spots with form?
No.
That's got to be the question.
No, I don't think they are. I reckon you'll see a bit of a new generation starting to flow through, which is what they've needed. And I'd like to see some freshness in that midfield as well, too, because once again, that's where the engine room is. It's no good having a nice back line and a nice forward line if the bit in the middle is going to completely fall apart and you're going to get beaten a fair bit, which is what hasn't happened. But once again, that older profile is those midfielders.
They got Sid Draper in, and he's the future for them. Yes. They're talking about Rankin playing more midfield time, and that's good. So the midfield, I'm pretty bullish about, and the forward line is just the backs. And sometimes when you've got a vanilla back line, they keep you in games. Don't necessarily need superstars. They've got Dan Curtin, but they're talking about running him through the midfield or something. I don't really know what to make of the
an absolute big unit. I don't know. Some of these players, they draft them as one thing, and for whatever reason, they try and make them into something else, and it doesn't work all that often. And so, why do it? He's a forward. Let him play forward, or play him at centre half back and let him crack skulls. I don't know. All right, now. One thing I've noticed over the Christmas period is that 98% of our viewers are not members of the channel. And so I'm going to ask a small favor to all of you out there. If you like our videos, if you love our content, please give us a subscribe. Because if you do, that means the bigger our channel gets, the bigger our guests can be as well too. So it's a simple thing. If you haven't subscribed to Lace Out, because we broadcast every week, me and the J-Dog, every week, hit that subscribe button and get our content delivered to you first and foremost as soon as it goes live, because we're Lace Out, and it's how you like your footy. Now, if you think that's a big little promotion, we're going to talk about one of the big boys. They're saying these guys are going to be one of the premiership favourites for 2025, and I tell you what, there'll be a lot of Lygon Street lovers whose hopes that comes to fruition. And I'm not talking about the Carlton Football Club. I'm talking about, they'll be next, I'm talking about the Brisbane Football Club. And in my eyes, Tommy Roker, Brisbane need to promise their supporter base one thing. They did it last year a little bit, but they need to turn up the pressure. Now, they were premiers in 2024, and it was a great grand final last year. Totally destroyed Sydney. But they got one Achilles heel, what they do, and that Achilles heel is when they don't have the ball in hand. All right? We know how good they are by foot, but when they're chasing, they don't chase that hard. They rank 17th for tackles, 16th for creating turnovers, clangers, and rebound 50s in 2024. Now, so it's great for them to have the ball in the hands of Neil, Dunkley, McCluggage, and the crew, but when the opposition have the ball, their desire to get it back isn't there. So are clubs, do you think, going to be able to expose this flaw from 2024 into 2025? I think that could be one of their big Achilles heels, because you look on paper, they've brought in another Ashcroft, and they've got 5 capable players who can slot in, who are coming back from ACLs last year. So as they would say, the rich get richer. Brisbane are only going to get stronger. And if I was a betting man, which I'm not, but I don't mind the old little flutter, which never comes in, you would have to say that Brisbane would be the premiership favourites in early February, late February, early March when the season kicks off, because they're just going to get stronger. They've lost Danaher, but I think they'll be able to pick up those goals. They're not going to get it from one gun. I reckon they're going to have to spread the load a bit. And I reckon Fagan will be working on that over that Christmas period, to have that one big forward and then to have the little ones around. But from a backline perspective, Andrews leads that beautifully. They're set up nicely. And that midfield, well, they just destroyed Sydney in that grand final last year. And what's the reason they can't do it again in 2025? Simple as that. And even like you said, you talked about their age profile. Well, yeah, they've got the third oldest list at 26.3 years, but those numbers can be skewed by a couple older heads. And they've got so much good skills at the bottom. They got so much at the bottom. They're going to roar.
Average age of the team on the day, Peps. And there are some teams that have got a lowish or medium list average, but the guys who play on the day are all 30.
Exactly right.
I think Carlton's back line we're going to have a look at, and their average age can actually be 30. But anyway, let's talk about Brisbane. They've got a number of players. One of their recruits is 32 years of age. One of my favourite players who's very underrated, Sam Day. But before I get into that, one of my favourite little stats in footy is that never ever in the history of VFL AFL has a grand final winning team ever shown up on the same field again. And I mean, I think we all probably experience that, when we play our own footy careers, there's always ins and outs but never ever. So
my team, the D's in 2022 had one player.
Missing,
and they weren't able to get them back.
Well, Joe Danaher already makes that impossible for Brisbane to get. So if it's just replacing Joe, Sam Day is a B-grade version of Joe Danaher. But it's kind of like Moneyball. What does Sam Day represent to the bottom line? Well, he can chop out in the ruck, which they used to get Danaher to do a bit, and he's not a bad chop out. Holds his own, and on the stats you don't see it, but those 5 minutes that the ruckman can get on the bench, including quarter time or half time, that gets him going. And
if he goes down, it's not as detrimental in the grand scheme of things as it would if it was a Danaher.
Yeah, he could just be kept on the shelf until they really just need a big.
Can I quickly interrupt? I want to interrupt on this one. Pet hate. Why do clubs send their gun full forwards to pinch hit in the ruck? I do not understand it whatsoever, because they're supposed to be the money men, and you set them up to cop a PCL, an ankle. If they do a knee going for a high fly in a marking contest, love it.
Yep.
But if you lost your gun forward in a ruck contest, I would be sending. I'd be sending the pitchforks and the pipes down there. I'd be. Remember when they dropped the load of manure down at Richmond all those years ago? I would do that, but I'd set it on fire.
Peps, you've got this modern position of ruck forward.
Bullshit.
But there's some players who can do it, and some players who they're thoroughbreds who shouldn't do it. Sorry, you can see my Geelong supporter in the background jumping all over the place. Cats. No, the thing with that ruck forward is you've got to get a big buffy bloke who is probably only going to be worth a goal or maybe 2 a game, but he's taking a big defender and he's chopping out in the ruck. And Sam Day can do that without it affecting him. A really good example of someone who doesn't suit that position but gets thrust into it is Peter Wright. And he said it when he was at the Suns. I don't want to be. Sorry, you make me your full forward or your centre half forward, and I'll run around all day and I'll take marks and I'll do my job. But if you don't want that, trade me. And that's what happened. And he went gangbusters at Essendon because they made him the full forward. And they went, "Oh, you could probably do a bit of ruck work, Pete."
Oh, who thought that idea? Hey,
we can't be seeing somebody trying to be a Joe Danaher, because he was good when he went in the ruck, but when it was a bit too big a risk, Fags would pick Oscar McInerney and Darcy Fort for that game, and maybe even put Fort on as a sub.
Well,
or sub him off.
Remember that final series in 2023? Danaher in that grand final was someone who almost, I won't say changed the game, but he swung it back into Brisbane's fortunes a little bit with his ruck work when he went in there. So if you've got, like you said, if you've got somebody who can do it, I'm just not a big fan, because if I pay a forward, I want them to be kicking goals. I could find some other sacrificial lamb who could do that around the ground.
Well, Sean Grigg, he used to do that, didn't he?
Brad Hopkins can only play about 10 games a year, win 3 flags.
Yeah, well, he didn't win many ruck contests, but all the midfielders in there sharking it. It didn't matter. Richmond weren't all that worried about it, but then they also went to a 2 ruck. If you actually have a look at every grand final winning team for the last 15 years, go back to the Hawks, start of their three-peat, David Hale, and Ben McAvoy, they always had they always had 2 ruckmen, and every premiership side has 2 ruckmen. even if one of them's a bit of a ruck forward, they're primarily a ruckman who might kick goals. So the great Melbourne premiership was, everyone said, "Oh, this is the future." It's like, well, no, if you have a look at it, a lot of teams have been running 2 ruckmen. Richmond did it with Nankervis and Ivan Soldo.
Oh, yeah.
So and they don't look like the same team with only the one specialist ruckman. So there's other reasons for that. But no, Brisbane, you're quite right. They're going to get a whole bunch of ACL guys back. Young Gold Coaster by the name of Levi Ashcroft, who's probably the second best thing to come out of that year of the Gold Coast Suns Academy after Leonardo Lombardo.
I can't believe that. Like they picked up a father-son gun the year before, and they just pick up another father-son gun who, in all reports, would have slotted into that grand final team if he could have played. That's how good this kid is. So
he's good. I
know it's rubber the green, because they had so many players leaving for so many years, and no one was complaining then, were they? So they're getting the rubber the green. But remember, Neil's getting older, Zorko's getting older. These guys are going to start to feel the pinch a bit. They need to rejuvenate.
Zorko's
they've got the McCluggages and Mr. Rayner, who had a really good final series last year.
But I think there's actually also a threat here, and the threat it looked like it was coming to fruition last year when Collingwood and Brisbane were garbage at the start of the year, and Brisbane weren't as garbage, but they were losing close games, and they couldn't get the combinations right, and players were dropping like flies. And then in the middle of the season, they started to get the right combinations. Players stood up, like young Logan Morris, and his debut. How good was that? He played in the bloody VFL the day my team. He played in the VFL. And he was eating McDonald's on the way to the game, and they said, "You're playing, mate," and come out, kicked a couple of goals and won it for him. So, they did have players who really stood up. Careful who comes out for the automatic selections coming back in. I mean, Link McCarthy, good player, but Peps.
Kitty Coleman, where put in.
Who comes out for Coleman? You think they're going to eventually work it out. I worry about Tom Doedee. He did his ACL, and they knew he had an ACL injury when he joined. Did it again first game back, come back after 7 months or 8 months, and now it's 10 months later and he's in full training. Really worry about that. Not many players come back from 3 ACLs and have a successful career.
No, and I think that in that, but unlike other clubs that which we will speak about, who go out for high-priced players and rely on them, they're not relying on him. He is. They're just keeping him dry in the back pocket in case something happens, because you've got a Doedee or a Doedee here, a female deer. But when you've got an Ashcroft who's going to come in, like, dudes, take it easy, mate. It's okay. Don't need to rush yourself back. I know you want to play, but you too, Link, you just take it easy. Kitty, just take it easy. We don't need to rush you back in where other teams would want them. So, like I said, it is only early February, but my goodness, I'm going to find it very hard to find a lot of holes outside. If they could work harder off the ball and really limit those issues that I spoke about earlier, good luck stopping them. I really mean that, because their forward line is sound. Their back, they don't rely on any key major forwards. They've got a nice spread of them. Their back line work really well together. They love using it by foot. I love teams that kick, not handball. And their midfield are on song once again. But we saw in that final against Carlton, even though that they dominated them, as soon as they didn't have the ball in their hands, they sort of go to sleep. So they can be caught on the counter. So watch this space, but there's nothing that I'm massively concerned with. I think they are premiership favourites, and then there's a big gap between them and second.
I think they also know the time you run, because, many years ago in the previous Lions dynasty, when they won their very first grand final against the Bombers, the team was garbage at the start of the season, and that happened last year. And they weren't really bad, but there were just problems. And then in 2001, the Lions went on a 16-game run, ran the ladder, ran the table, and won the grand final against all odds. Last year, similar sort of signs that that they got going, the leaders got together and said, and this is fan service. They said, "Fuck, what are we doing? We need to win some games and get some momentum." Because players look at the ladder, players read what's being said about them, and suddenly a more exciting brand of footy was getting played. But I do agree with you that it's not exactly laconic, is it? But it's just kind of like they've turned it over, and now it's pinging up that direction, and suddenly the opposition's scored a goal. This will be a close one. Well, you can't keep having shootouts forever, and I think there's a few teams that are guilty.
Mel found that out, didn't he, when he was coaching?
Yeah.
I don't care if they score 130 points. We only have to score 131. Like, that can only go for so long. But
yeah. Well, the Lee Matthews, you kick 16 goals, you probably won. But there are outliers in big games where if someone's kicking 17 goals and you're kicking 16, there's some big problems. But you'd rather you can limit the opposition to 10 goals. Any day of the week.
That's what they need to be able to do. And stopping that, like I said, when they haven't got the ball will lead to a massive reduction in that, and makes it easier to be able to go for longer, stronger, and not have to rely on kicking big bags of goals if they're not letting the opposition score as many as well. All right, we're 2 teams down in our massive 3-team preview. We've gone through the Adelaide Crows. We've gone through the Brisbane Lions. And now we're getting on to, as I was going to a little bit earlier on, get into the Carlton Football Club, the Lygon Street Lover Boys. My promise for Carlton, what they need to do is simply get fit. Now, with Carlton, they were the number 1 team. Now, listen to this, Tommy. They were the number 1 team for contested possessions, centre clearances. They were 3rd for inside 50 tackles. They had the Brownlow medalist, and yet it was the same old Carlton at the back end of 2024 as it was for 2023. So much relied on the backs of Patrick Cripps, the Brownlow medalist, Jacob Wiedering, Charlie Curnow, and Harry Mackay. But at times throughout 2024, they all missed games through injury, which puts more pressure on the rest of the list. Now, the arrival of new fitness boss Rob Innes will get them rock hard, whilst free agent Nick Hines and gun draftee Jagger Smith will improve their on-field deliverables. They must improve on the most tackled team of 2024 tag, and with a fitter list, it'll allow them to go harder for longer, not only during games, but much deeper into September. So with the Blues, they've got so much. If you look, they've got stars on every single line. But if those stars get injured, which they did happen quite a bit last year, it then relies on the next level down. And do you have the trust in them? Do you still have the trust in an Adam Sard, a Sam Doherty? Their runner-up, best and fairest, Nick Newman, he's not going to be there. I know they've said patella tendon won't be for the whole season. It's going to be hard to get back. Sam Walsh has had his hamstring injuries again. Now, I'd said in the previous video that it might be a blessing for them to get the Camporelli twins in, get Jagger Smith in, get some games in, so when Smith comes back, they're a little bit hardened for the contest, hardened for the game, up to speed, etc. But I just think for Carlton to dominate, Curnow and Mackay have to be there 23 out of the 25 games. Wiedering has to be there 23 of the 25 games. Cripps, Walsh have to be there for a majority of the season, because I think the dip down to that next level, their backline is getting a little bit older, and I think clubs could probably expose them. They love the contest, but they're the most tackled team as well. So
yeah, true. And I mean, look, their midfield stacked. Their spine is amazing, but the young whippersnapper in their backline is their Jacob Wiedering. Their A grader, but then they brought in Nick Hines,
32.
Sam Doherty's coming back. I mean, he did play the one game in the finals, which I thought was stupid, but good on him. He's a very passionate guy, and he's had rotten luck with injuries. So and with cancer, So good on him. Adam Sard, 30. Zach Williams will probably play further up the ground. That's sort of been his thing. But I think he's a natural halfback, but they don't. Mitch McGovern, 30.
What did I say earlier? Oh, we'll bring him as a midfielder. You're not a midfielder, mate. Know your limitations.
One game and they got 32 possessions, and they went, "Oh my God, let's pay him $900K a year on an 8-year contract." He's a good player, but he's not that great. I'll tell you what.
Who's 30, who's as reliable as a Balinese Wallis as well too. Like, there's just their backline is susceptible from an age perspective, and they've been injured throughout the year. We saw what happened when their backline went down throughout last year. They just couldn't win.
They are talking about Jack Silvani playing down back, and I don't hate it. I like Jack's a B grade player. I mean, his father and grandfather were champions, but you know, could Jack Silvani be?
I could see him as a centre half back. I could see him as a centre half back. He just needs to touch.
Yep.
And he can't take a mark, or more a bit of a swing man. But I think more of a centre half back.
He's tougher now than he ever was before, and he's always had a lot of critics. I don't hate the guy. I just don't. I don't know if it's a premiership winning backline with him in it. But they've got some options. But the I guess the problem that I see, and I think you're right to mention the Camporeale twins, but that's a project that'll come on. Jagger Smith, okay, he'll come straight in, but maybe the recent trend is to put these newly minted 18-year-old midfielders in the half back line, or run them off the bench and give them a taste of, and what are you going to do? Because you can't keep him in the VFL.
So their age profile averages 26 and a bit, but we saw when we go at their list, there's a quite a number of that 30, 29 realm that are pushing it. So they've got a lot at the top. They've got the youngies, and in the middle's a bit thin. So they need to strike while the iron's hot now. Otherwise, there won't be much that happening in September, unfortunately.
No. But, I mean, look, the Carlton at their best can beat anyone.
Yep.
And I think that's what's getting the fans excited, is that it's been 30 years since they won Peps. And we both remember back in those days, they won every third year. They had superstars. They had absolute legends. They've got good players again.
But we won't bring that up. Well, no one heard us say that, I think.
Nobody bloody liked them, and they paid plenty of brown paper bags. But they and much more recently than anyone else. But no, they finally got back up there. But I think sometimes Pep's Carlton, they're one team, and this kind of happens to a lot of Melbourne-based teams. They just have blockbuster after blockbuster after, and you can see it takes it out of them, because if they're playing Collingwood in the game of the round at the MCG and it goes to it's a bloody 1-point victory or whatever, you can guarantee that next week they're going to be flat. They're going to be bruised. They're going to be hard to get up. And if they've got a Brisbane or a Sydney the following week, eventually it's going to get tough for them. But they only have to travel 6 or 7 times. So, they've got it, in a way, they've got it easy. But I think you made a really great point. They seem to get to the right up to the pointy end. They're a bit like teams like Port Adelaide, becoming sort of perennial bridesmaids, not even making it to the big dance.
So it's just, you wonder if they, in my eyes, Carlton really need to bag. What were they last year? They were 8-2 at one stage.
Oh, they were right up there.
Fell in a complete heap. And lucky to make finals if it wasn't for that last round.
Yeah.
So they need to bank those wins, but they also then need to, when the pressure gets on between June, July, when it gets colder, they need to spike.
Yeah.
And that's where that's where teams start their run. They didn't do that. And so they're really nice at the start. I would rather them be a 6-4 team than an 8-2. And through the middle of the year go 5-5 than 2-8 or whatever the number was. Like, they had that really strange, massive high run, low run, high run. They've got to be more consistent. And Voss is under a lot of pressure as well. So I don't care what anybody says about that. Like, he was brought in to do a job, and it hasn't happened just yet. It's great to make finals, but you're sick of playing eliminations and first semis. You want to go to that next step. You know, prelims. You want to get the prelims. That should be the goal of every team, is make a prelim. Because when you get to a prelim, anything can happen to get in that grand final. But if you have a look at their group across the board, if you have a look at their leaders from last year, it was the same names that we mentioned earlier on: Newman, Cripps, Curnow. Pitnet, funny enough, had more he had most hit outs for the game as well too. Mitch McGovern. Tom de Koning is going to be an interesting story. Will he stay? Will he go?
$1.7
million of me. I love my teammates, but I'd be an idiot if I turned that down.
Well, Mac Andrews is going to be on.
Money more important than success. Am I going to get it at the Kilda, or am I going to get it at there? I'm not sure.
That good?
Yeah.
Is Tom de Koning a future number one ruckman in the comp?
Nope.
Is he going to be top 5? Is he top 5 now? I wouldn't have thought so.
What's his position?
Ruck, apparently. I don't.
He did turn the final for Carlton, mind you. They were 80 points down at one stage, but he did get them back into the game. Whether or not Brisbane turned the power off, but he's not a 1.7. 1.7 goes to the Ulalas.
I wonder if that's just a typo somewhere in the Chinese whispers and.
I reckon he's the Timu version of his brother.
Well, you know, his brother. No, head to head, Tom has the rub, but he doesn't have a
medal around his neck,
flag medal yet. So at the end of the day,
where do you reckon they're going to finish?
I'm going to have to say again for Carlton, middle 6. They're not exactly like Adelaide, and they're fairly likely to be in that same bracket as last year and making finals. But it's so close. I mean, last year, if you won 11 games, you were bottom 6.
Yeah, that's very rare.
If you won 13 games, you didn't even quite make it in the.
I think my team. I think had a 14th, being the D's. Everybody knows that, and it was the lowest position for a team that's ever won. I think 11 games throughout the season. Like that's just ludicrous. 11 games would have got you in finals years ago. Like that's just how things are really evening up across the board as well too. But I think with Carlton, I don't trust them. That's my issue.
I don't like.
I love their supporter base. All their supporters, I love them to death.
They're funny.
Yep. Oh, they're frustrating. They're annoying, and they're pains in the ass at the ground. But God, they're loyal. They've stuck through a lot. So
I'll tell you what,
supporters, I do love you. I can subscribe and ring the bell. But no, I people are saying that they're top 3 or 4 for premiership. I don't think. I think there's other teams that are in a better position. So I can see them. I can see them finishing anywhere between. Yeah, I think you're right. 6 and 12.
Yeah.
Are they going to improve from last year?
No, I don't think so because
where did they finish last year?
Looking at the ins and outs, and we've already mentioned Newman as the injury. They won't miss my old mate Jack Martin. Matt Owies was a weird one. Like if you're getting goals,
I don't understand that one. I have no idea why they got rid of him.
And Matt Kennedy was one of the hard asses in their midfield. So Jagger Smith comes in for him, but I mean Jagger's probably got a few things that he can add to them. But at the bottom line, if you've got a defensive-minded midfielder like Matt Kennedy, but they're hard. They're always hard because when they get on a run, they're world beaters.
Yep.
And when they fall in a hole, it's a long hole, isn't it? So if you look at Michael Voss's Carlton coaching career, it's up, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down.
Well, Lowies kicked 33 goals in 13 games last year.
Yeah.
So where are they going to find those 33 goals from?
Yeah. McKay.
Leave a comment if I'm wrong, but I'm struggling to see it on paper.
Well, Charlie Curnow just had 2 operations. So he's either going to come back mint or he's going to sort of struggle to get because he doesn't have that solid block of pre-season and rehab. but I'm sure he'll be fine.
Yeah, no. I reckon he'll struggle the first 6 weeks. If you don't do a preseason, we've seen so many players over the last 12 months, 2 years, especially now the way the game is. If you don't do a preseason, your season's over.
Yeah.
You're not going to be battle hardened.
No.
Every club's got them. Every club. I could name 2 from the D's last year that didn't do a preseason, and it showed.
Yeah.
Your mob, you could probably pick somebody who didn't do a preseason last year, and it showed.
Jed Walter.
Jed Walter didn't do a preseason. Oliver and Petty, there's 2 of them. Didn't have to do a preseason. It showed. Now they're both rock hard. They've done a full preseason. I don't think they've missed sessions. Walter will hopefully be the same. So you got to do a preseason, and I think there's a few anomalies with Carlton, Walsh, Curnow. Like I said, you throw in Newman plus who's left. Their first few weeks might actually be a little bit messy. Might not be as what it was last year. So that might get them to that 6 to 12 possession. I think I'm actually going to pick them to not make the 8.
Yeah, but it doesn't. But there's like the top 8, and then the next 8 are going to be teams who at some stages were contending. And if you look at last year, a couple of teams came steamrolling through, like Hawthorn. And the Hawthorn didn't beat anyone. Oh, I guess they did. They beat a couple of good teams, but they beat a lot of middle-of-the-road teams to sort of get there. And then they went a bit deeper into finals than anyone thought, because everyone thought they weren't going to make finals at all.
Yep.
And we'll get on to Hawthorn later, but the reason I mention it is because there were so many teams between 9th and 15th who were contending, and they were just not taking those opportunities. And several of them lost to Hawthorn. And if they had beaten Hawthorn, the Hawks don't make the 8. And things change, right? So it's really a momentum thing. And if the Blues can actually build that momentum, as you said, into the when it really counts and get into the top 8, well, the likelihood is that they're going to be playing, even if it's an away final, it's going to be at the MCG, 55% chance. So we'll see.
And Carlton win 60% of the time, every time when they play away at the MCG in a final. Viewers, listeners, there's part 1 of our 3-team preview, Adelaide, Brisbane and Carlton. Leave your comments below. And like I said earlier on, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button, because I think 98% of our viewers aren't subscribers, and we want to grow the channel, and we need you guys to do it as well too. The great Tommy Roker will be joining me for the future rollouts, so stay tuned for your team. It is coming, and more importantly, I want to hear, like I said, in the comments what you think about our first 3 teams, Adelaide, Brisbane and Carlton. Tommy, you are an absolute superstar. You know it, but I have one question before we wrap this one up, rampaging Tommy Roker, and it's simply this: how do you in 2025 want your footy?
Oh, Peps, as always, lace out.
Love it, big dog. Stay tuned. Future videos coming up. Thanks, viewers, and thank you, listeners.